What if the person you dismissed today became the one person who controlled your future tomorrow? It's a thought that sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? Life has a way of turning the tables when we least expect it, teaching lessons in the most unexpected ways. Step into the world of a bustling high school, where reputations are built in the blink of an eye, and the quest for popularity can sometimes overshadow kindness. Here, we meet Ryan, a boy who has mastered the art of being the center of attention. He's confident, charming, and the one everyone seems to look up to. But Ryan's confidence comes with a dark edge. He thrives on putting others down to maintain his status. On the other side of the classroom sits Sarah. She's not the kind of person you'd notice right away. Quiet and focused, she keeps her head down, her nose buried in books, and her dreams firmly planted in her mind. To Ryan, Sarah is invisible, or worse, a source of entertainment when he's in the mood to show off. But what if I told you that Sarah's quiet strength would one day eclipse Ryan's bravado? That the tables would turn so dramatically, it would leave him questioning every choice he made. This story isn't just about a school bully and his victim. It's about the power of resilience, the unpredictability of life, and a lesson that everyone needs to hear. Stick around, because by the end of this journey, you'll see why it's so important to treat everyone with respect. You never know who they might become. Ryan wasn't just popular, he was the kind of student who knew how to command attention. Whether it was cracking jokes, telling exaggerated stories, or showing off his skills on the basketball court, Ryan had a knack for making people laugh and look up to him. Teachers often admired his charisma, and classmates wanted to be in his circle. But there was another side to Ryan, one that only a few people truly noticed. For Ryan, staying at the top meant keeping others below him. He didn't just thrive on his own achievements, he thrived on the weaknesses of others. Teasing wasn't just a game for him, it was a way to secure his position as the class clown and the one everyone wanted to impress. If someone stumbled over their words or didn't have the latest shoes, Ryan would be the first to point it out, his sharp tongue always ready with a clever jab. To Ryan, it wasn't personal, it was just fun. He didn't stop to think about the impact of his words or how they might linger long after the laughter died down. It wasn't malice, it was thoughtlessness, a careless disregard for the feelings of those who couldn't fight back. But little did Ryan know, the very attitude that made him feel untouchable in high school would one day become the very thing he regretted the most. His arrogance wasn't just shaping his relationships, it was setting the stage for a lesson he would never forget. Let me know when you're ready for the next section. While Ryan was busy enjoying the spotlight, Sarah quietly observed from the sidelines. She wasn't the kind of person who would ever crave attention. In fact, she preferred to keep to herself, her head buried in books, her mind always a few steps ahead of everyone else. Sarah was the girl who could solve any math problem in seconds, write essays that left teachers speechless, and memorize facts effortlessly. But none of that ever mattered to the people around her. To most of her classmates, Sarah was invisible. She wasn't part of the social scene, didn't wear the trendiest clothes, and didn't know how to strike up casual conversations. She wasn't shy exactly, but she had a quiet confidence that made her stand apart from the chaos of high school life. In a world where popularity ruled, Sarah didn't mind being left out. Her focus was on something greater, her future. But that didn't stop people from noticing her in their own way. To Ryan, Sarah was an easy target. She didn't fight back when he cracked jokes at her expense, or when he casually poked fun at her lack of social status. In Ryan's eyes, Sarah was nothing more than a background character in the high school drama, someone who wouldn't fight back and would never challenge him. Yet Sarah's silence didn't mean weakness. Far from it. Her resilience was quietly building, her dreams quietly forming. Little did Ryan know, the girl he saw as harmless was one day going to be someone he could never have imagined, someone who would turn his world upside down. Ready for the next section? Just let me know. It wasn't long before Ryan's casual teasing crossed the line. One afternoon, the class was working on a group project, and Sarah found herself partnered with Ryan. As always, she kept to herself, trying to focus on the task at hand. But Ryan, eager to maintain his position as the center of attention, saw an opportunity to have a little fun. He leaned over to Sarah with a smirk on his face, pretending to be helpful. "You know, Sarah," he said loudly enough for the whole table to hear, "maybe you should let me do the talking. I mean, we all know how bad you are at public speaking. Wouldn't want you to embarrass yourself in front of the class." The room went silent for a moment. Then a few giggles broke out. Ryan's words hung in the air like a cruel echo, his friends exchanging knowing glances. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. Everyone already knew the truth. Ryan was in charge, and Sarah was just the girl who couldn't stand up for herself. For a moment, Sarah felt small. The laughter around her made her feel invisible, like she was nothing more than a joke. But despite the sting of humiliation, she held her ground. She didn't argue or cry. She simply nodded, choosing to focus on the project instead. It was in this quiet defiance that Sarah found her strength. Ryan, on the other hand, basked in the attention. He didn't see the impact of his words after all. It was just a harmless jab. Right, but that moment, that one instance of public humiliation, marked something in Sarah. It wasn't the first time she'd been mocked, but it would be the last time she let it define her. As weeks turned into months, Ryan's behavior towards Sarah became a routine. It wasn't just the occasional jab or teasing remark, it became a pattern. Every time Sarah answered a question in class, Ryan would throw in a sarcastic comment, drawing attention to her stutter or the way she hesitated. If Sarah was carrying a stack of books, Ryan would sneak up behind her and knock them out of her hands, laughing as the books scattered across the floor. The worst part, it wasn't just Ryan. His friends joined in, feeding off his energy. They all knew that Sarah wouldn't fight back. She wasn't the type to snap or yell. Instead, she quietly took it, every insult and prank wearing her down little by little. To them, it was just fun, harmless entertainment. But to Sarah, it felt like a never-ending barrage, each comment cutting deeper than the last. She had tried, once or twice, to speak up, to tell Ryan that his jokes weren't funny. But each time, her voice trembled, and her words fell flat. Ryan would laugh it off, as if her discomfort was just part of the joke. "Oh, come on, Sarah," he'd say. "You know, I'm just messing with you." And with that, the bullying would continue, the cycle repeating itself over and over. But what Ryan didn't realize was that Sarah wasn't as fragile as he thought. She wasn't going to break under his taunts. Instead, she began to develop a quiet resolve, an inner strength that he couldn't see. Sarah's silence wasn't submission. It was the calm before a storm that was brewing within her. She wasn't going to stay in the background forever. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about finding a way to rise above. And in that moment, Sarah made a promise to herself. She would never let Ryan's words define her. It was during a particularly intense group project that the tipping point came. The class was working on a presentation about historical figures, and Sarah had been assigned a prominent role. She had prepared meticulously, doing extra research and practicing her speech in front of the mirror for hours. She was ready to shine, or at least to present the best version of herself. But Ryan, as usual, had other plans. He was supposed to handle the visuals, but he took it upon himself to dominate the presentation. Just as Sarah stood up to speak, Ryan made a sarcastic comment, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, look, it's Sarah trying to speak in front of everyone. Let's hope she doesn't trip over her words again." The class erupted into laughter. Ryan's friends joined in, and for a moment, Sarah felt that all too familiar rush of humiliation. But this time, something inside her shifted. She wasn't going to let Ryan steal her moment again. With a deep breath, Sarah locked eyes with him. For the first time in a long while, she spoke up, not quietly, but with authority. "Ryan, enough," she said, her voice steady, but strong. The laughter around the room faltered as people turned their attention to her. Ryan, taken aback by the firmness in her voice, raised an eyebrow. "What? You gonna cry now?" Sarah stood tall, her hands slightly shaking but her resolve unwavering. "No, Ryan, I'm not going to cry. But I am going to finish this presentation, and I'm going to do it without you making me feel small." For a moment, there was silence. Ryan, usually quick with a comeback, was speechless. The room seemed to hold its breath, unsure of how to react. Sarah took the podium and began her presentation. It wasn't perfect. She stumbled over a few words, and her nerves still made her hands tremble, but she held her ground. Ryan, realizing that his usual tactics weren't working, finally fell silent. And in that silence, Sarah found her power. It wasn't about winning the crowd or getting back at him, it was about reclaiming her own voice. It was a small victory, but it was enough to spark something inside her. For the first time, Sarah realized that she didn't need to fight back with anger. She could stand her ground with grace. And in doing so, she started to change the narrative of her life. As graduation day finally arrived, the classroom was buzzing with excitement and anticipation. Students were eagerly talking about their future plans, and the atmosphere was a mix of relief and nostalgia. For some, it marked the end of an era, the end of high school and the beginning of adulthood. For others, it was just another chapter, one they couldn't wait to leave behind. Ryan, ever the confident one, had his plans all laid out. He was heading to a prestigious college, confident that his charm and wit would take him far. His future seemed bright, and he wore it like a badge of honor, making sure everyone knew how successful he was already going to be. He had no doubts. High school had been just the first step, and he was sure he would continue to rise in the world, just as he always had. Sarah, on the other hand, was more reserved about her future. She had earned a scholarship to a different college, one where she could pursue her passion for science and research. And like Ryan, Sarah didn't talk about her plans with the same level of confidence or flair. She was quietly determined, focused on her own goals, and unwilling to let the opinions of others define her. As they walked across the stage to receive their diplomas, their paths seemed to diverge completely. Ryan walked with the ease of someone who knew the world was his oyster, while Sarah took each step with the quiet grace of someone who had already learned the most important lesson of all. Success isn't always about being the loudest in the room. The years following graduation saw Ryan struggle to live up to his own hype. College wasn't as easy as he thought. His arrogance, once a tool for getting ahead, quickly became a liability. Ryan found himself facing the harsh realities of competition, hard work, and failure, things he had never really encountered in high school. Meanwhile, Sarah flourished. Her quiet determination led her to earn top grades, secure internships, and build a reputation as someone who could get things done. She wasn't interested in proving anyone wrong. She was focused on proving something to herself. And in doing so, she began to rise in ways that Ryan could never have predicted. Their paths had separated, but little did Ryan know, their worlds were about to collide again. The transition from high school to college was harder for Ryan than he had anticipated. Back in high school, everything had come easily to him. His charm, his ability to talk his way out of situations, and his popularity had all paved the way for him. But college was different. No longer could he rely on his good looks and sharp tongue to coast through. He quickly realized that the world outside the bubble of high school wasn't as forgiving as he thought. Ryan's grades weren't as stellar as he'd expected, and his social circle was smaller than he was used to. His arrogance, once a source of pride, became a liability. Professors didn't tolerate his lack of preparation, and classmates didn't find his jokes funny when he wasn't actually contributing to group projects. For the first time in his life, Ryan began to feel the weight of his own limitations. His friends from high school weren't there to back him up anymore, and the college experience, while filled with opportunity, also came with harsh realities. Ryan struggled to find his place, constantly battling self-doubt and frustration. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was always just a step behind everyone else. He'd been so used to being the star, the one everyone looked up to. But now, he was just another face in the crowd. His sense of invincibility was crumbling, and with each passing semester, Ryan found himself questioning his own future. The easy path he had once relied on had vanished, and he didn't know how to navigate the challenges ahead. It wasn't long before he realized that success wasn't just about being loud or charming. It required hard work, humility, and the ability to learn from mistakes, things Ryan hadn't been forced to develop in high school. As Ryan struggled to keep up with his peers, he couldn't help but think back to those days in high school when he had put others down to lift himself up. He treated people like Sarah as if they were beneath him, and now, he couldn't help but wonder if that had been his biggest mistake. But Ryan still had no idea how much of a lesson life was preparing for him. While Ryan struggled to find his footing in the real world, Sarah's quiet determination had been paying off. After graduating with honors, she landed a prestigious internship at a well-known tech company, something that seemed impossible back in high school when she was often overlooked. But Sarah had always known that her value wasn't defined by the opinions of others. She had always known that success was about perseverance, intelligence, and hard work. Sarah threw herself into her work with the same focus and dedication she had applied to her studies. Her ability to solve complex problems, Her innovative thinking and her drive to constantly learn made her stand out. Within a year, she was promoted to a junior position, then a senior role. People began to notice Sarah's talents, not because she was loud or flashy, but because she consistently delivered results. What Ryan hadn't realized during those high school years was that Sarah had always been building something bigger than a reputation. She had been building herself a foundation of resilience, intelligence, and a quiet confidence that couldn't be shaken by petty insults or mockery. While Ryan had been busy chasing popularity, Sarah had been investing in her future. Her success wasn't an accident, it was the result of years of quietly pushing forward, even when others doubted her. Sarah had learned early on that the most powerful way to rise above the noise was to stay focused on what truly mattered: your own growth, your own potential. And now, her hard work was paying off. Sarah had become someone who was respected and admired in her industry. Her colleagues looked to her for guidance, and she had earned the trust of the people around her. She was no longer the shy, quiet girl in the back of the classroom. She was a leader, someone who commanded respect not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. Ryan, on the other hand, was still struggling to find his place. He had no idea that the girl he had once mocked was now becoming a force to be reckoned with in the very field he had hoped to conquer. Years passed, and the lives of Sarah and Ryan continued on separate paths, seemingly destined never to cross again. But life, as it often does, has a way of throwing unexpected twists into the mix. One morning, Ryan received an email that would change everything. He had been struggling in his job, barely making ends meet after college and unsure of what direction to take next. The company he worked for had just been acquired by a larger firm, and the news was full of uncertainty. Ryan had heard rumors that major layoffs were coming, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of his insecurities pressing down on him. His usual charm wasn't working anymore, and his resume wasn't enough to impress anyone. To his surprise, the email he received wasn't about the layoffs. It was an invitation to an important meeting with the company's new leadership. He didn't recognize the name of the person inviting him, but the title seemed promising. Ryan figured it was a standard company-wide introduction, and he decided to attend. What he didn't know was that this meeting would be the turning point of his life. As he entered the conference room, Ryan noticed a few familiar faces, but none that really caught his attention. He took a seat, scrolling through his phone to pass the time. Then, the door opened, and in walked the last person Ryan expected to see. There, standing at the front of the room, was Sarah. The confident, poised woman who had once been the quiet girl in the back of the classroom was now in charge. She was the new director of the department Ryan worked in, the very person who had been brought in to lead the team through the transition. Ryan froze. His heart raced as he tried to process what was happening. The girl he had mocked, belittled, and dismissed all those years ago was now his boss. Sarah looked out over the room, her eyes scanning the faces of the employees. And when her gaze met Ryan's, something passed between them, a recognition, a flicker of the past. But she didn't let it show. She remained calm, collected, and professional. Ryan's mind was spinning. How had this happened? How had Sarah gone from the quiet girl in the back of the class to the woman in charge? And how would he navigate the awkwardness of being in her presence now, knowing everything he had done to her? Sarah didn't acknowledge the past. She simply began the meeting, outlining her vision for the company's future and the changes she intended to make. Ryan could barely focus on her words. All he could think about was the fact that the tables had turned and he had no idea what was coming next. As Sarah spoke, Ryan's mind raced. The confident, collected woman in front of him was nothing like the shy, reserved girl he had once tormented. There was a sense of power and authority in her presence, and it was clear that she commanded respect from everyone in the room. Ryan couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, something he had long avoided confronting. He remembered all the times he had made fun of her in high school, the way he had put her down to make himself feel better. He thought back to the cruel jokes, the mocking comments, and the way he had taken pleasure in her discomfort. And now, here she was, not just succeeding but leading. It was a sobering realization. Ryan had been so focused on his own success, his own popularity, that he had never considered the long-term effects of his actions. He had never thought about how his words could shape someone's future, how they could either lift someone up or tear them down. Now, he saw it all so clearly. Sarah hadn't just survived high school, she had thrived. And the very things he had seen as weaknesses in her, the things he had used to mock her, had actually been her strengths all along. Her quiet resilience, her determination, her ability to stay focused on what truly mattered, these were the qualities that had made her who she was today. Ryan, on the other hand, had relied on his charm and popularity, never taking the time to build the inner strength and character that Sarah had cultivated. He had taken the easy route, the path of shallow success, while Sarah had worked quietly, steadily, building a foundation for a future far greater than anything he had ever imagined. Sitting there in that meeting, Ryan felt a wave of regret wash over him. He had underestimated Sarah. He had treated her like an afterthought, like someone who wasn't worth his time or respect. And now, she was in charge. She was the one calling the shots, and he was the one left questioning his choices. He couldn't help but wonder, how could he make amends for the hurt he had caused? Was it even possible to fix the damage he had done all those years ago? The meeting went on, but Ryan barely heard a word after that. His thoughts were consumed with the realization that the girl he had once bullied was now his boss. How could he have been so blind? How had he not seen her potential back in high school? He had dismissed her as insignificant, never considering that she would one day be the one in control, leading with the kind of grace and intelligence he could only dream of. After the meeting ended, the room cleared, but Ryan remained seated, his mind still spinning. He couldn't just let this moment pass without confronting it. He had to face what he had done. He had to apologize. Taking a deep breath, Ryan stood up and walked over to Sarah's desk. She was reviewing some documents, her back to him, but as he approached, she turned around, her calm gaze meeting his. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Ryan felt the weight of the years of silence between them, the years of unspoken tension and regret. Sarah didn't say anything either, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something that told him she already knew what he was going to say. I owe you an apology, Ryan said, his voice surprisingly steady. I've never really said this, but I want to. I'm sorry for how I treated you in high school. I was a jerk. I thought I was better than you, and I made you feel small. And for that, I am truly sorry. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time, Ryan saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it forgiveness? Or perhaps just the acknowledgement of the truth? He couldn't tell, but he knew that this moment was a turning point for him. She finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. Ryan, I appreciate your apology, but honestly, it's not about me anymore. It's about you. The person you were back then isn't who you are now, and I hope you've learned something from all of this. We all have our own paths to walk, and we can either choose to grow or stay stuck in the past. What matters now is what you do moving forward. Her words hit him like a wave. Ryan had expected anger, or perhaps indifference, but Sarah's response was neither. She wasn't holding on to resentment. She was offering him the chance to do better, to be better. And in that moment, Ryan knew that this wasn't just about making amends with her, it was about changing himself. I'll do better, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. I promise. Sarah nodded, giving him a small, knowing smile. Good. I hope you keep that promise. As Ryan left her office, he felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of his past mistakes hadn't disappeared, but for the first time, he felt like he had a chance to change. Sarah had taught him a lesson in humility and growth, one he would never forget. As the days passed, Ryan worked hard to change. He took Sarah's words to heart, understanding that his journey wasn't about seeking redemption from others, it was about changing his mindset and growing as a person. Slowly but surely, he started taking responsibility for his actions, learning to lead with humility and empathy, qualities he had never truly valued before. His interactions with his colleagues shifted. Instead of using humor as a shield, Ryan started listening more, offering support when it was needed, and trying to uplift those around him rather than tear them down. He found that the more he focused on lifting others, the more respect he earned in return. It wasn't easy. Change never is. But Ryan was determined to become someone better, not just for himself, but for those he worked with and for. He had learned the hard way that true success wasn't about being the loudest or the most popular. It was about integrity, hard work, and how you treated the people around you. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to excel, leading her team with the same quiet strength that had always defined her. Ryan found himself looking up to her, not with resentment or jealousy, but with admiration. He respected her not just as his boss, but as a person who had endured and grown, just as he was now trying to do. Their relationship was no longer defined by the past. It had evolved into something more mature, built on mutual respect. Sarah had forgiven him without holding on to the past, and Ryan had learned the true value of kindness, humility, and growth. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content that can inspire change and growth in your own life. And remember, no matter where you are in your journey, it's never too late to start over and become the person you've always wanted to be. Keep striving for better, and who knows, your story might just be the next one that inspires someone else. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.